Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Art of Samuel. So today I'm going to be talking about my process of creating a comic book or a comic strip. And the reason why is because I was asked on a recent podcast what was my process. And so it made me think. And some of you may not know that when I first created There's an Alien in My Toilet, it started off as a comic strip, and here are some of the original storyboards for the comic strip from '05. Right, so this is how it originally started, and I went and I purchased these from Blue Line Pro, these comic strip formatted layouts, and that's how I originally started. But I'm going to talk about the script writing, how I go from script to illustration. And as you can see, when I reviewed this, back then, everything was hand-drawn. Today, I'm doing everything digitally. So even here, like right here, these are all my original storyboards from '05 through '08, and as you can see, there's some penciled notes. So I would actually write my dialogue on the pages. So the way it worked for me was I would plot out the story, and then I would start illustrating, and then the dialogue would come as I illustrated the scenes. And some might think that was counterproductive, but that's exactly what worked for me with this story, There's an Alien in My Toilet. And so every single one of them was done that way. Now, these pages were redrawn for the new series, for the book. So I decided to re-release There's an Alien in My Toilet, and I re-illustrated books, I believe, 3 on up. So everything is re-illustrated, and I also rewrote the story. So comic strips, illustration, and my process. One of the things that inspired me growing up, and I'm going to switch over to the drawing table so you can see my process, but one of the things that influenced me growing up was Charlie Brown and Peanuts and the Sunday Funnies. I don't know if any of you remember Sunday Funnies. They were newspapers. Back when I grew up, there were newspapers, and on every Sundays we looked forward to, as kids, the Sunday Funnies, because there was a whole section of newspaper with just comic strips illustrated, whether it was Hagar the Horrible, Garfield, Peanuts, Beetle Bailey. There were just so many different comic strips. They even had a comic strip for Spider-Man, and there's a specific format and technique to comic strip illustration. And so for me, when I decided to go into comic strip making, I deferred to like comic strips done by Charles Schulz. And I don't know if you ever picked up this book, The Ultimate Peanuts book. This helped me. And also I studied basically the comic strip layout. So I looked to see where balloon placement was, the spacing between character and dialogue, positioning, all those things. And eventually I evolved to Calvin and Hobbes. And as you can see, to Calvin and Hobbes, you always want to make sure that white space. Again, Bill Watterson, I think, was fantastic illustrator. I wish that he would have allowed licensing for Calvin and Hobbes, because he chose not to. But imagine a full Calvin and Hobbes animated series, and a whole bunch of stuff that was just possible. But he had a hard stance on that. But anyway, so the gist of this is that any creative, there's always a source of inspiration. And while there is that inspiration, I think the best thing that anyone can do, at least the best thing I did for myself, was to actually try to study how each panel told a story, and how the illustrator moved the characters along those panels to be able to captivate, because the comic strips on Sunday Funnies were probably 3-4 panels at most. But there was a beginning, middle, and end, and there was always a punchline, and you had to be able to tell that story in 4 panels or less. And that was one of the messaging or the takeaways that I took from it. So, how do you, where you compare it to a comic book, where you have 24 pages and hundreds of panels in that book to tell a story, to tell you beginning, middle, end. So for a comic strip creator, it requires a certain skill to be able to, whether it's humor, have that punchline, whatever it is, the art of storytelling in 4 panels or less is probably the most skillful crafts for an illustrator writer out there. And so because I illustrated Duty as a comic book, I decided that I'm going to be doing it as a comic strip as well, to introduce you to another audience, because I'm working on a project. And going back to drawing Duty the way I started out doing it, I had to go back and revisit the art of comic strip creation. And while I'm a comic book creator, there's a different science behind comic strip. So, and that's why I'm going to take you on a journey. So I'm going to show you how I lay out the pages. I'm going to show you how I take the information from a script onto a specific comic strip page. And this is going to be one strip. And on this strip, I believe there is 7 panels on this strip. And basically it's just telling Duty's story. So if any of you ever picked up this Nail in My Toilet, you're going to see that a lot of it is recognizable, but all of this is re-illustrated for the comic strip. So from pencils to inks to colors, I'm going to do it here. And if you want to see me continue with this series on the lettering phase, just let me know, put a comment below, and I will have a part 2 to this. It all depends on you. If you want a part 2, I will do it for you, because I believe that you really want it. But so if you haven't been to this channel before, I would love if you subscribe. If you like this episode, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, help those algorithms, help this channel grow, and I appreciate every single one of you. So let's go on to the storyboard and let's talk about the art of comic strip making. All right. So the first thing we start off is with the script, and this is the original Bible or universe. Right, some people call it the Bible, some people call it the universe, but it's basically the world building. And you can see that's the original logo. The logo has changed since. But I always start off when I am creating a series. I have a plot, but I come up with the character bios. So you can see here, I have Duty, Desiderius Uranius. He's the son of the leader of Uranus. I give him his whole backstory. The only son who was spoiled his entire life and made to believe he was the best at everything he did. So, and this basically, the reader won't know this until I actually divulge this in the story. So what I love about building the character's history is all the things that only I as the writer know. Right? And that eventually will come out and play out in the story as it builds up. So there's General Goatee. He's also responsible for Duty, safety. There's Alan Roberts. He lives in the home, in the residency, where Duty gets into that home. And there's Bobby. That's Alan Roberts' son. Then there's Herman the Chihuahua, who, the rivalry begins with him and Duty. He thinks Duty's a talking jalapeno. He's trying to get at him. There's Special Agent Doe, and he's on the case to track down Duty. And then there's a bunch of other characters like We Are Not Alone Incorporated, WANA. They're a special nonprofit national organization collected for the study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. And then there is No Boo for You, Catching Ghosts is What We Do. There's a team of Ghostbusters that's also in the book. Then there's the janitor, TJ, as short for the janitor. You'll find out about Chi Day's role in future episodes of Disney in My Toilet. And then there's NPOW, Nasty Piece of Work. They're the villains in the story. You'll find out more about them. Then there's the girls Dolly, Daisy, and Dee Dee. And again, if you picked up Duty's Monsters on Planet Cthulhu, you'll know more about them. But then here is the chapter 1 first flush. So here's what I normally do. I write out the plot for the chapter, and to give me enough to guide me. And this is what I use when I actually go and draw the book. So in this chapter, Duty has his assignment, go to Earth and gather information to determine if it poses any threat to his homeworld, Uranus. Duty, the pride of Uranus, crash lands on Earth and uses it as a cover to infiltrate the forest. He immediately encounters a woodpecker that he attempts to intimidate with tough talk. The woodpecker pecks Duty at Duty and his chute, causing him to plummet from the tree branch to the ground below, and so on and so on and so on. So this is what I use. This is my starting point. So I have the characters that are in the universe, and now the reason for the characters is I know where they will come in to the story in future issues. They're not all in the first issue, second issue, third issue. They slowly trickle in because they all play pivotal roles. But I always use this plot. And then when I have this plot, I use that plot to write my, to start drawing. And so there's chapter 2, I see red people. Chapter 3, I see Wawa. Chapter 4. So I write out the plot for every single issue. And the chapters are basically the issues. So book 1, book 2, book 3. And that's basically what I do. I write out the chapters. Tag if you're it for chapter 8, chapter 9, Fire in the Hole, chapter 10, Where's Duty, 11, Dead End, and 12, Duty Go Home. So, and again, this is where I use this. I think whenever you're going to write anything or draw anything, you need to have a backstory, you need to have a premise, you need to have the plot. So that's what. So to put things into context, when I first created Disneyland in my toilet, this is the actual first thing I wrote down. Alien leaves homeworld and heads to Earth. He loses fuel and crash lands in a small town in Michigan. He seeks refuge in a home and finds the only place to hide is in the bathroom, right? So that was what I originally wrote. And then it evolved from there. So now if I'm going to write the script, and normally, so I'm going to do this as we're going, right? So what I would normally do is I would do page number 1. And for a comic strip, I would call it panel number 1. Panel number 1. And I would describe the panel, right? Duty in the center with a crowd behind him cheering him on as he walks towards the camera. He has a smirk on his face. And that's basically what I would do. And this would just let me know of what I would need to, how I would need to illustrate. So I ad-lib the backgrounds because I know that it's in space on Uranus, and then I can just come up with what I think the scenery would look like if I'm actually drawing it. If I'm writing for someone else, then I would start off with in a space station. That's how it started, right? Duty is in the center. Then I would put Duty is in the center with a crowd behind him. So, and that's how I would start that if I'm writing for someone else. And then like panel 2, number 2, Duty is in his ship, camera at his back with view of the console and space as he approaches Earth. And that's basically what I would do. So and the dialogue comes when I actually illustrate it. So if I was saying say I was writing the dialogue here, I would put duty, duty, you know, let's say I, was hand picked by the top brass, the best of the best is what they say, right? So, and that basically how I would structure it. So it would be panel, then a dialogue. All right. So if I just log and then go from there. And then now we'll move on to the sketching portion of this. All right, for the sake of this illustration, I am formatting my page in Clip Studio Pro 6 by 12, right? So 6 inches tall by 12 inches wide. And so right now I've determined the size of the panels for this comic strip, leaving the top left-hand side blank, which that's going to serve for my logo for the comic strip. So once I have the layout in order, I'm going to quickly rough in the art. I'm going to sketch in really quickly. It's light, and you can see my art is very rough. Nothing smooth about it. And basically, I'm laying it all out. And this is going to prepare me to ink. So remember when I started writing the script, I said Duty is walking towards the camera with a crowd cheering him from behind. He's in a space station. So that's basically what's happening here. So I'm just placing shapes and figures in the panel and moving on to the next. So remember the next scene, well, this one basically the camera's at Duty's back as he's looking at the console as he's approaching Earth. And then here, again, your thumbnailing should not be very detailed. I never do a lot of detail with thumbnails, and because I work on a computer, I don't even flesh out my thumbnails. I go straight from these rough sketches to inks, well, using black line over the rough sketches. So basically, this is Duty, falling towards Earth after his UFO crashes, and again, this is him hanging from the trees as with his chute on Earth. And again, basically, when I'm doing this, as you can see, there's a lot of white space above. And then I realized I missed the panel. So what I'm going to do is I move the characters over and I put the crash of the ship. I forgot that one as I'm drawing. But once I have the final layouts done, then I'll go straight into adding the black line work and the inks. And what I love about drawing on a computer is that I can just cut and move body parts if I felt like I positioned anything off, and it just didn't make sense. So now I'm going from here to here, and what I'll do is I'll zoom in on a panel and I'll start just going over with black lines. And this is going to help me set the stage for coloring, but here you can see I'll add the little details and nuances that I didn't have in the rough thumbnail sketches. And this is, again, this is a 6 by 12. I don't have a large format printer, so I won't be able to print it. So I'm hoping that it'll translate when I do print it. I'm going to invest in a large format printer to help me when I do these things to make sure that everything comes out in the right size and dimensions. But again, so here it is. This is the crowd cheering Duty on. And because my style is very cartoony, there's not a lot. I don't use cross hatching or shading with the blacks. I usually do that with color. So it's just quicker and easier. And as I go along, you're going to see that I always keep in mind where the balloons will be placed in each panel. Because it's a comic strip, I have to make certain that there's plenty of room for the dialogue. And the first couple of panels, it's really narration. You know, they're thought balloons or Duty narrating what's happening as it's about to as he's getting ready to head to Earth and you know, crash land on Earth or whatever it is. You know, when enjoying this, I always reflect on Garfield and Charlie Brown and the comic strips that I grew up with, and how much I took for granted when I would read these things because I didn't realize the science behind it or the art behind it. I was just entertained. I was an observer, a fan, being entertained by the works done by the creators, whether it was Jim Davis or Charles Schultz or Bill Watterson with Calvin and Hobbes. It wasn't until I began to approach a page and wanted to do my own that I recognized that I needed to really understand the fundamentals. And because I didn't want to, I wanted to get it right. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is really just understanding what your dialogue is going to look like, where is it going to be placed. The thought balloons, the word balloons, they're always going to be a significant part of your layouts because you want to make sure that you're not overlapping the characters or taking away from some of the work that you've put in when you're illustrating. So because of this, what I'm doing is I'm going to color this panel for the sake of this episode. So because the frames were on a separate layer, I did another underline frame so that way when I drop in colors, it doesn't spill beyond the borders. So right now I'm just doing flats for this episode. I'm just going to drop in some flats. And I've already memorized a lot of the palettes and the color codes for Duty, so it's easy for me to just pick and go and drop the colors in for the book. So if you can see right now, that's General Goatee from the character bios that I shared with you guys. And then there's just a bunch of scientists and space fillers, and there's going to be a lot of circular heads in the background, and they're just going to be fillers. And what I normally do is I drop darker colors in the background to create the illusion of a crowd, which is the magic of drawing comics, which is probably the best part of it. And then going from there. But again, the whole purpose of this is really for Duty to be the center of it, but identifying key players in the background. So General Goatee is a key player in the background, the scientists, all these things. So while it's Duty that's speaking, you're going to be able to reference visually some of the supporting casts or the really pivotal casts in the storyline as future episodes are released down the road. And sometimes you don't have to identify or introduce the character. What happens is the reader will recognize the characters in future episodes. And it's like that subtle introduction. You don't have to always have dialogue say, you know, like for example, this scene where Duty is basically talking about how excited he is that he is the smartest, most advanced species in the universe, and only he can go on this top secret mission to Earth. Really boosting his own ego. I'm not going to go in and say with a General Goatee standing at my side and the entire, because there's no need for it. It's the subtle things. And then so what happens is when the General Goatee does appear in future episodes with dialogue, people are going to remember where they first saw him. Oh yeah, that's right. He was in the background. Okay, now I get it. I get the ties. I get the connection. And you can see all the white space on top. I did that for a reason because there's a lot of dialogue in this one frame. So I wanted to make sure that I left enough space. So now I can go in and actually create the illusion that they're in a space station or like a corridor, right? So I didn't have to sketch that in. But now because I look at it, I'm looking at the page and I say, oh, well, there's a need here. So let me go and fill it up. And basically the corridor is just made out of metal. And I'm going to pick a specific color, which is like an off grayish blue, and fill it in. And
So, and that's why I tend to do that a lot. I tend to draw the characters in the scenes and then fill the backgrounds as I'm drawing it. Again, it's very different and it's kind of productive in some people's eyes, but it works for me when I'm illustrating my series.
All right, so what do you think so far? If you want a part two, again, just gotta let me know, and I can definitely do a part two of this. But I can't do these series episodes without the recommendations, and again, I just want to redirect and remind everybody some of the things. So here's another Charles Schulz book, you know, Peanut Treasury. I mean, if you just look at the artwork and the pages, I'm a big fan of Charles Schulz. Big fan of Peanuts. I grew up with the Red Baron, and I grew up with Charlie Brown Christmas Special and the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and but that's a great book. If you haven't picked this up, you need to get yourself a copy. But also, you know, the Calvin and Hobbes. I also have the complete series of Calvin and Hobbes right here. So I'm gonna pull this out real quick. Oh, my books don't fall. But this is the complete edition. This is 4 volumes of the Calvin and Hobbes series. Again, I'm a huge fan, and as you can see, you have both black and white, and you have colored versions in here. Sorry about that, having technical issues, right? And it's a great book. Great collection. I got this on Amazon for a deal. I got the soft cover because the hard cover was not in my budget, but I needed to have this in my collection. But again, and finally, you know, the ultimate Peanuts book, 65 years in the making. So these are all fantastic things to have in your collection if you're a creator, if you want to do comic strips or even comic books. And you know, I always feel compelled to be able to share what I appreciate from other creators and how I pull information from it. And I think that's the biggest thing. How do we pull information from what inspires us? Because these masters, I call masters, right? They were the great ones, the ones that were there before us, the ones that paved the way and opened up the doors for all of us. You know, they got it right. They found the formula. And, you know, the art of storytelling is, I guess it's a matter of taste, right? So what advice would I give to anybody who's trying to create comic strips or comic books? It's create for yourself, write for yourself, tell stories that you are passionate about, and put life into the characters. And don't worry about whether or not people will buy into your project or your characters or your storytelling. If you are in love with what you do and you put your heart and soul into it, people will recognize that, and they will eventually come along to ride. And if you're creating for a niche market or to follow a trend, it's not necessarily from the heart, and that's also recognizable as well. People will know that you're just trying to make a quick buck. So Duty is my character. I love There's Nail in My Toilet. I love the character Duty. He is my buddy. He's right here. This is my little green friend. And if you haven't picked up the book and you subscribe to this channel, please head over to dutiesworld.com and get yourself a copy. I would love for you to have one. And don't forget, April 4th, the launch of There's Nail in My Toilet, the graphic novel, volume number 1. That's a big milestone for Duty, right, Duty? It's a big milestone for the little green guy. I'm excited about that, and I hope you come along for the ride. And at the end of the day, if you believe in yourself, the universe will believe in you, and eventually the stars will align in your favor. But it all depends on how much you put into work, and keep going forward. So with that said, thank you for joining me on this episode of The Art of Samuel. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, put a comment below, like, subscribe, and if you want a part 2 with lettering of this comic strip, put it in the comments. Let me know. You guys have a great day. Talk to you soon. This is The Art of Samuel, signing out.